All right, now we are moving on to corporations, and there are several different types of corporations. However, what we're going to do is mainly be talking about like bigger business corporations such as Nike, Sony, Apple, Microsoft, those type of corporations. Now, technically, I'm guessing that Maddie's dad and any of your parents that own their own business, they're technically incorporated, which is slightly different than a corporation. Incorporated, and this is just free information for you, would simply mean this, that your business is separated from your family. And actually, let me do this. Let me just move forward because this will kind of explain a little bit. So, here's what a corporation is on the bigger scale. The description is this: owners of a business legally declare the business to be separate from themselves. So if you owned, let's say that you owned a barber shop, and all of a sudden people start coming in there and they're finding out that the shampoo that you're using on the people's hair makes their hair fall out, and they decide to sue you. In theory, if you are not incorporated or a corporation, or what sometimes they use initials at the end of like a business, LLC, limited liability corporation. Um, so like Avery's dad, I know for a fact has that on his stuff. I've seen it on his truck and on his business card. And what that means is if they sue you, they cannot sue your family. So they cannot take possession of your house. They could take possession of your business and they could take all of your business earnings, but they could not go after your family. You cannot go after your house. So if somebody gets hurt on the job, they could not sue your family, they could sue your company. And that's kind of the idea behind a corporation. It's where owners of a business legally declare the business to be separate from themselves so that it's like a separate entity. You know, a corporation could enter into a contract, it can be sued, it could buy property, um, and it's also where the government recognizes the corporation's right to sell stocks, to raise money, to own property, and to enter into contracts. So this is where like the Apples and your Nikes and your McDonald's of the world's kind of like come in. Avery's dad is not going to be selling stock to raise money. The way Avery's dad's company makes money is they make a good product. They build houses really, really well. They renovate kitchens, living rooms, dining rooms, bathrooms, whatever. They do it really, really well. And that's how they make money. But like when you think about a place like Apple, they make money by selling shares of stock, but also selling a product. So a corporation is where the business is legally declared separate, or the owners of the business declare it separate from themselves, and where they can possibly sell stock. So a couple different types of corporations. You have what we call a public corporation. Again, we're talking on this in the bigger scale, not the local scale. But a public corporation is owned by the public and managed by the government, meaning the public actually pays for this corporation itself and via taxes probably. The best example of this is the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA. That would probably be our best example of a public corporation. A private corporation is more of what you think of. It's owned by private citizens. Shareholders is kind of what we would call them. That would be like your Apple, your Nike, Google, Disney. You know, it's owned by private citizens. It's not owned by just like the government. The government doesn't own them. Private citizens own them. Now you might be like, so the Walt Disney family, is he the primary owner? Yes. In all of these cases, you will have somebody who will be like the main shareholder, which is usually like the face of the business. If you guys think of like Tesla, Tesla sells shares of stock, but Elon Musk is the guy who is the main shareholder. So he has 51% of the holdings, so that he has that value. Phil Knight for Nike has that. I'm trying to think. It used to be Steve Jobs for Apple, but I cannot remember the guy's name now. But the point being is it's owned by private citizens that are shareholders, and they are main shareholders. So let's also talk about stocks. You guys have probably heard of stocks before, but basically what it is, it's a certificate of ownership in a corporation. A lot of your parents might own stock in companies. You know, I know that Emma's dad is a financial advisor, and so he probably knows what stocks are good stocks, what stocks are bad stocks. But it's a certificate of ownership in a corporation, basically, that you are a part owner. They send you like kind of like a certificate, but they also send you a booklet telling you where they've invested their money, because in theory you're a part owner. Now, if you only own one share of stock for Apple, let's say, they don't really care about you, and they could probably find somebody else to buy it if you don't want it. But let's say that you own 20% of stock in a company. They care about your opinion. They want to make you happy. And so you can buy stock in corporations. You guys, your families can do that. And it's a certificate of ownership in a corporation. And the stock actually helps show the value of the company. I'm going to show you examples of this in just a second. And so when you think about the stock market, I know if you guys have Apple or if you guys have iPhones, most of you guys probably don't even use it, but they have a stock chart on your Apple, on your iPhone that can actually explain how much a company is valued at. So I'm going to show you that in just a second. So let me give you an example here. Apple. So this would be like their market summary. All of them have where they trade, like the NASDAQ or Dow. You guys have probably heard the Dow Jones Industrial Average kind of thing. But this is at the beginning of January 2nd in 2020. They have a label, AAPL, that would be Apple. And all of them have kind of cool ones sometimes. Some are cooler than others. But what's interesting is this. When you look at this, this tells you how much a share of stock is, $300.35. So if you wanted to own one share of stock in Apple, you would be paying $300.35. Obviously, some trading fees would go into that. And you guys might be like, well, how many shares are there out there? Market cap means how many shares they have allowed people to trade. 1.33 trillion shares. So when you multiply 300 times 1.3 trillion, they have a lot of money. Oh my goodness gracious, they have a ton of money. And so that kind of gives you an idea of how much is out there and how much it's worth. Now you might be like, can you give me a comparison of what other ones, like something else, like a big corporation would be? Yes. I'll go back to that chart in just a second. Starbucks. For you white girls that love Starbucks, S-Bucks, I love that. I think it's kind of cool. $78.69. Now, again, this was in April of this year, but April. So significantly lower than the $300. Now, you guys might be like, what do all these numbers mean? So, for example, on that day, it opened at $296.24. The high went up to 300.6, and then the low went down to 295, and it changes all day long. Now, this is the one day at 10 a.m., 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it kind of shows you kind of what it did. But you could click on 5 days, 1 month, 6 months, year to date, 1 year, 5 years, as much as you can go. And what it does is it kind of tells you the volatility. If you had a stock that, in the 1 month went up and then way down here and then went up, it's volatile, and you might not want to take that chance. And so the 52-week high, meaning in the last year, the highest they've ever went was 360. The lowest they went was $142, which would be, sometimes people say when it's really low, you want to buy them. This might not be interesting for some of you guys, but I think it's fascinating. The P&E ratio basically means like what you pay and then what you get back, like a dividend. And then the dividend yield is basically what you might be making per year on your stock. So 1%, 2%, which in some cases could be pretty good. 1% of $300 might not be too terrible. So this is what it would look like. Let's go to Starbucks here. It's a little more volatile here. This is what they showed. They showed the 5-year. So over 5 years, kind of doesn't really, it kind of gets stable, and all of a sudden it kind of peaks up here in 2019, drops a little bit, 2020, and then drops again. And so it kind of tells you. So in a year, the lowest it went was 50, and the highest it went was $99. How much does it yield? 2%, which isn't terrible as well. So again, people decide on what they want. Now, how many shares do they have out there? Plenty. And the reason why they have so much plenty out there is because it's not that expensive. So they're able to push more of them out there. That'd be Starbucks. So this is just kind of what a stock would do. I'll kind of show you a little bit of what stock trading is like. But again, it's basically a certificate of ownership in a particular company. So let's talk about some advantages to a corporation. Well, the first thing is it's limited personal financial liability. Because the owners have declared it separate from themselves, it means that they're not as personally financially liable. Now, when this company gets started, they might be a little bit more, but once it becomes a corporation and it builds itself up, you're not held as super high like you would with a proprietorship or partnership. Experience management. Most of these corporations just have unbelievable amounts of management skill that people bring to the table. People that are crazy smart, accountants, business managers, um, financial officers, you name it. So tons of experience management that are going to be at the table. They also have specialized employees. They have like a protocol of how they're going to train employees. You think you go to like an Apple store and you see the Mac geniuses, and they have like a protocol, they have a uniform, they have a code, they have all of these things that they're going to be doing, and they have specialized employees that might be able to do, oh, this person's job is specific in this. Whereas maybe if you have a smaller business like a proprietorship, maybe like you're building houses, all of the employees might have to just kind of know everything, a little bit about everything. But in specialized employees you can have in a corporation, they're focused on their one task. Corporations have a continuous lifespan. What that means is if somebody in the corporation dies, they just find somebody to replace them. It continues on. Even when Apple lost Steve Jobs to cancer several years ago, it continued on. Yeah, they went in a little bit of a downward trend for their stock value, but the company still goes on, and most of you guys all own iPhones or Apple Watches or a MacBook or whatever. And so it's a continuous lifespan. Whereas in a proprietorship, again, the owner dies, things kind of go away. Think about that movie when Batman Begins. Bruce Wayne's parents are shot. Hopefully, I didn't ruin the movie for you guys, but his parents are shot, and sure enough, what ends up happening is Bruce Wayne kind of runs away, and so they had nobody in his family that was really around there, and they had another guy kind of take over, and he didn't do a very good job. But again, the company still continued on. Now, it's relatively easy to raise capital, and the reason why I put pending there is it depends on how your business model looks. If you don't have a very good business model, then people are going to want to buy your product. So Apple was really, really struggling there for a long time back in the mid 80s when they were trying to really kind of get going. And they really did struggle, and in the 90s even. But once they kind of changed their model and wanted to become like the quote unquote cool computer, then all of a sudden they started making a ton of money. So it does depend on your business model as far as that goes. The disadvantages to a corporation, generally higher taxes, although it does depend on the presidential leadership. Sometimes presidents are a lot more friendly to large corporations. A lot of government regulation, mainly to make sure that you don't have monopolies and to make sure that your workers are being treated correctly. And they just kind of, it's really hard for Apple to hide. It might be easier for a proprietorship that owns a barbershop to hide. With a big corporation like Home Depot, Starbucks, those type of things, you have big stories that come out of that. There is a lack of secrecy, mainly because you just have so many dang people that are going to be in your business. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to be in the structure of the corporation. They're going to be there. You're going to have a lot of workers, managers. It's hard to keep secret information. My wife and I were looking at how to make the spicy pineapple, grilled pineapple that Famous Dave's makes. What did we do? We just Googled online how to make that. And sure enough, somebody from Famous Dave's had posted a recipe on that. So again, lack of secrecy. And a lot of times people don't like corporations because they're kind of impersonal, meaning, you're just kind of a face. When you walk into Home Depot, you're just kind of another person, another number. Same thing with Apple. Everybody has an iPhone. So you're just kind of like, it's kind of, you're impersonal. It's not super like, oh man, hey Joe, good to see you again. How's the family? You walk into a barber shop, you've gone to the same barber. Like me, I've gone to the same barber for like the past 10 years. My barber growing up, I knew for forever. And so they get to know you. But again, at Apple, you're just kind of like a number, mainly because they have a ton of workers and they have a ton of customers coming in. So it's kind of impersonal. And a lot of times a corporation is slow to make adjustments, meaning like they have a business model, they have policies, products sold. It's not as easy to just flip and say, hey, we're going to start making this. Like when McDonald's started making their restaurants go to like those computer automated systems, they had a couple test areas, and then eventually a lot of them are going to have them in there. It just takes a lot of time because there's so many things out there and so many regulations. All right, we will